Welcome to our AMA, Ask Me Anything. We're going to start with asking Nick anything.
Go ahead. So these questions have been collected over the past week and a half, right?
Yep.
Nice, perfect.
Over Facebook, email, our website. First one comes from Holly. How has your time as selectman uniquely prepared you for the role of first selectman versus a candidate without that experience?
Well, I've been very lucky to work with Dave. We're on the phone almost every day, sometimes multiple times a day. He's kept me abreast of all the major decisions going on in town hall. I've learned a lot from him. Learned a lot from everyone in town hall. Chris Calvert, Christy, who serves on the board with me. I think when you have the weight of being in that position and you know you have to represent the entire town, not just the people that supported you, it's a heavy weight. It reminds me a lot of my professional experience where I manage a business. I've seen what Dave has to do on a day-to-day basis. He's essentially the CEO of the town. I think we have different styles. But I manage in my personal life a complex business with 30 plus employees, thousands and thousands of customers. I've negotiated with unions, which is something the first selectman needs to do. I've dealt with HR issues. I've dealt with budgets. And I've seen how Dave has worked through those things over the past 2 years. I'm eager to bring that experience to the role.
Okay. All right, Nick, next question. What are some of the funniest or most frustrating misconceptions you've heard about yourself? Things you wish you could clear up once and for all.
That's a funny one. I think the most frustrating thing is people think because of our slogan being preservation with progress, for some reason that I'm in favor of development, high density development, that I'm in favor of commercialization. And I moved to Easton, where I've had family for generations. I moved here because my wife and I wanted to be in a rural community. We like the way Easton is, and I want to protect that. I want to ensure that we don't have overdevelopment. Frankly, I'd like no development at all, but I know that's impossible. And I don't want more commercialization. I like the town the way it is. I like our 4 businesses and our farms. I think the craziest misconception I've ever heard, someone approached me after a Board of Selectmen meeting once and said, I know you didn't move to town on your own accord. You moved here to be a plant for developers. And I think that's just crazy talk. I guess the other frustrating thing is I've been at this for 2 years serving on the Board of Selectmen. I've been on planning and zoning before that for a year. I've been to countless community events. I am a very open book and people can reach out to me anytime. Mm-hmm. And the people that tend to have the most questions never pick up the phone and never email, but they're very loud online.
Yeah. So a few residents have asked, why hasn't there been a public debate between you and your opponent? Some have expressed frustration or confusion about the decision and what it means for transparency. Can you share your perspective on why a debate isn't taking place and what you're doing instead to ensure voters can hear directly from you and Adrian before Election Day?
That was funny because you're Adrian.
Yes.
You read that. But this is an interesting thing. I really wanted to have a debate. To me, the most important thing was that we use a neutral, objective moderator. And you know this, and I'll tell everyone. We reached out at the end of July, I think it was July 25th, via our campaign manager, not our handler. Our campaign manager is a very capable professional and who's given it her all for this campaign. And we suggested the Easton Courier or Sacred Heart University, some sort of combination. And we were open to another suggestion. And the RTC immediately said, we'll take this under advisement. People were very polite about it. And within 30 minutes, I believe my opponent emailed saying that he would never do a debate with the Easton Courier or Sacred Heart, that the Sacred Heart University has some sort of hidden agenda in our town, that the Courier is biased, and then he hurled some personal insults at me. So we sort of took a breath, and at that point there was a little back and forth about, what are your suggestions, for an objective moderator. And it's frustrating to think about this because we really try to get ahead of this and try to work with people on finding someone. There's tons of suggestions that are popping in my head. The Republicans came back and said, well, what's your suggestion? Well, we suggested one already. I don't think people really understand how negotiation works. We said something, and their answer was, what's your next offer? That's not how this works. We were trying to do something for the community so there could be a neutral, objective debate where citizens' questions could be heard. And unfortunately, this went on. So we waited another 5 or 6 weeks. And at that point, we reached out again and said, what are we doing? Is the Easton Courier still on board for this? Is that an option? Have you thought of another option? At that point, there were 3 or 4 threads going on between Alicia Young and the campaign, between Dan Lent and the campaign, between Christie and the other candidates. And I want to make something clear. Christie was nothing but a professional throughout this. Mm-hmm. She was open to a debate. She was open to even debating, I think, with the Easton Courier. At that point, at the end of August, Dan sent a very long email with multiple personal attacks against us. And once again, we reached out and said this only reiterates why we need a neutral moderator. And then he suggested the former Republican first selectman who he was campaigning with, and a Democrat who was never asked whether he was willing to participate. And just because you have a Republican and a Democrat doesn't make it a neutral and objective moderator. Right. So at this point, we just sort of said, and again, you know this, these aren't serious people. This is not a productive discussion. So what are we going to do to make sure that we hear from town residents? So what have we done? We've knocked on 1,650 doors and had hundreds of direct conversations face-to-face with Easton residents to hear their concerns. We've set up this, Ask Me Anything, which I think is a great idea, and I'm hopeful if elected, we can continue to do this every 3-4 times a year, something like that. And we're having a candidate forum on October 17th, which we did last year, or last cycle in 2023. And residents can come and ask questions, and we're going to be interviewed by a panelist, 3 panelists, and I think it's going to be a really good opportunity for people to ask questions. I think we'll answer a lot of questions here, but again, going back to my previous answer, I'm an open book. Email me your questions.
Right. So, what led to your decision on voting while you were on P&Z to break our 3-acre zoning on Saddle Ridge? And why do you think that would be a good idea for Easton?
So to clarify, I didn't vote to break 3-acre zoning. Right. I voted for something called a conservation development. It's another option. It's an option that prevents 830G affordable housing and breaking zoning in that way with high density projects. What it does at its core, it preserves more open space in perpetuity. So if you have 90 acres and you could get 30 houses on 90 acres, this would let you have 30 houses on 1 acre lots, just like in Lower Easton, and 60 of those acres would be protected in perpetuity. We need to provide options to protect as much land as possible because the town can't afford to buy up all the land, and land trusts can't either. In my ideal world, we wouldn't have any of these large tracts of land developed. We need to have options that prevent high density development using affordable housing laws that the state mandates. I want to prevent cluster housing, high density housing, apartment buildings. And I know we banned community septic, but that's not going to hold up in court if we continue to knock down these projects. So this conservation development, which was first voted in 2019 and then
long before you were on the page.
Yeah, and then revoted in 2023, and I supported that because I want us to protect as much land as possible in this town and protect our rural character. And if you could give me the option between an apartment building or protecting 2/3 of a property, of a large tract of land in our town, that's what I think is better for our town.
Right. So there's a lot of concern about overdevelopment. What tools can Easton use to protect open space while still complying with state housing mandates?
Well, I think first and foremost, we can work with land trusts. We can work with the state. The state has some funds. We need to work with private landowners, succession planning on with farms and large tracts of land. You know, it's funny, South Park is a good example where we partnered with the land trust, and my opponent was concerned about selling that land to the land trust because he thought the Aspetuck Land Trust could potentially develop that land, which the mental gymnastics of that makes no sense. The other thing is advocacy. I am very out there in saying, and I did it this past summer when HB 5002 was being debated, I urged the governor to veto that bill. I think affordability is an issue in our state, but I think that there needs to be different rules and requirements, different criteria for towns of our size. If you have under 10,000 people, you can't be expected to have 10-20% affordable housing. A town like ours, the governor has said to me face to face, well, you don't have the infrastructure. Then let's just exempt us and stop talking about it. If you told Easton residents we had to build 20, 30 single family affordable housing units in the next 10 years, I think we would all say, that seems right. But when you try to come in here and use a one-size-fits-all mandate from Hartford that says we need 500 affordable units, that just doesn't work for our town. So I think we need to work with our partners in the state across party lines to prevent one-size-fits-all mandates and to advocate for change for affordable housing, because that's the only way this is going to change. We can't overrule state law.
So next question, what investments do you think Easton needs most, whether that's EMS, infrastructure, or recreation, and how do you plan to fund them responsibly?
So that's an important question. You know, our tagline is preservation with progress. And I think the preservation is pretty key. We're trying to preserve as much open space as possible. The progress, interestingly enough, a lot of people have said you can't have preservation with progress. The progress are these kind of investments. It's the EMS building being renovated. It's investing in a better food pantry that has perishable and non-perishable, that allows people to come with dignity and privacy to get the things that they need. It's investing in things like a town attorney on retainer, because we've had a lot of lawsuits over the past year. Last night, I was at a Board of Finance meeting until almost 10 o'clock, and we talked about the need for school infrastructure updates, things that need to happen, whether it's sort of ongoing maintenance issues that cost big dollars for a parking lot, or more important capital projects like putting a roof on Helen Keller. And we've been asking for some sort of prospectus on what these projects would be. We've heard whispers about it. We have over the next 2 years about $8 million of proposed projects. Now, I think we could get that down. Some things don't need to be done to the level that I think is being proposed. But I'd like to see, my big question last night was, what about year 3 and year 4 and year 5? And what could we have been doing over the past 4 or 5 years to put money aside and plan for this? Because I think we need to think more strategically and more long-term when it comes to infrastructure projects in our town. And I also think that there's a way for us to leverage our relationship in Hartford to get Hartford to give us money here, whether it's through state grants, the bond commission. There are a lot of options, and that's one of the things that I think is key on how we pay for these projects.
Perfect segue to the next question, which is Easton's success often depends on working with regional and state partners. What partnerships have you built, and how can they help the town in the next term?
Well, yeah. I mean, so, you know, here's where I have to say one of our key partners in Hartford, and I've been criticized for saying this, is Ann Hughes.
Right.
Ann Hughes has brought a lot of money to our town. $400,000 for the EMS building, $1 million grant for the library, and many, many more things. And she's going to bring more money to our town in the future. our state senator and our other state rep, they do a great job advocating for us. But the truth is, Hartford is controlled by Democrats, and Ann Hughes is a Democrat. And I disagree with her on many issues. I mean, we clashed over the housing bill this past summer.
Right.
But one thing she does is she brings money to our town. So there's a very important relationship. I think it's important for us to have relationships on the federal level. I met with Congressman Himes the other day to talk about some of the issues our town is facing. I think it's important for us to have relationships with our constitutional officers in the state. I met with Sean Scanlon the other day. I meet and speak with Susan, our lieutenant governor, often, and I've met with the governor. These are the kind of relationships we need to have an advocate, someone that's willing to go up to Hartford and advocate for money coming back to us and creating the relationships and partnerships that we need on the state and federal level. I think another important partnership is our neighboring towns and also nonprofit organizations like Easton's Here to Help, and also the Land Trust, Aspetuck Land Trust, has been a great partner for us. You know, I was trying to do this thing with Fairfield where we would get a discounted beach permit in exchange for them to have access to our fields. And that's one example of sort of thinking outside of the box on, you know, we have field space, they have a beach, how can we work together? Unfortunately, their first selectman passed away, and we haven't had the opportunity to continue that conversation, but there's an example of something else. I didn't want to just say state, federal partners, but there's a lot of local and regional partnerships too here.
Good point. So this next question is, will you please keep working with internet companies to install lines into Easton so we can have another option than Optimum?
So we do have another option. Frontier is starting to come into the town.
Right.
I think it's going to take time to be everywhere. Also, under Dave Bendelglass, we have put high-speed internet that is accessible to the public in the library, which is key. If your power goes out and you need to work or you need to contact people, you can come to the library and use that internet. You can sit outside the library and use it from your car if you need to. But I think it's important that as more people work from home and that we have better access to these things. So it's something I'm definitely in favor of. Unfortunately, I don't control the internet companies.
Right. How do you see the current political climate and this administration, I think they're asking on the national level, impacting Easton both now and in the years ahead?
Well, we've gone and knocked 1,650 plus doors, and we're re-knocking the doors now. And we've talked to a lot of Easton residents, young families, particularly seniors that are concerned about some of the federal issues, and we can offer a sympathetic ear and some guidance. It's very tough because the state and the town certainly doesn't have the funds to backstop a lot of those issues. There's a lot of concern. People are concerned, you know, the latest survey, and it's one of the reasons I discussed the food pantry, 9% of Easton residents are food insecure. There's a greater need in this town than I think a lot of us understand. We tend to think we're Fairfield County. You and I have had conversations about what it's like to be on the exchange right now, the health exchange, and how insurance is going up. People don't realize if you're on the health exchange, you're getting subsidies. Your payments could go from $400 or $500 a month to $3,000 or $4,000 a month. And that means people will go without insurance. That's not to mention a lot of the other federal policies that are unpopular right now. What I think we can do to help the community navigate that is publicize as many resources as possible, work with the senior center, our municipal agent who's great, to make sure that people partner with nonprofits like Easton's Here to Help, and to let people know what options are out there. I've spent a long time serving on nonprofit boards, and there's a lot of great nonprofits in Fairfield County, but sometimes we need our town leaders to stand up and sort of show us the path and show residents the path to getting the help that they need.
Yeah, great. Do you support Strong on Center operating a business without a permit?
No, I don't. It frustrates me, and I've had this conversation with you. I've had this conversation with others. That was unacceptable.
Yeah.
You know, business owners like you and other people with major and minor home-based businesses bend over backwards to comply. And I kept telling Dave Bendelglass, like, I don't understand why we can't put a lien on the property. You know, we can't force them to stop doing what they're doing. They withdrew their application. They are going back to a less intensified business structure. You know, I believe in the rule of law, and they were just flouting it, and it was unacceptable, and we drove past it and saw it every single day. And that's why we need better zoning enforcement, and we need better regulations when it comes to at-home based businesses, both major and minor. I think that there is a lack of consistency. You know, the example I always use is if your buddy from high school lives next door to you and runs a huge landscaping business out of there and you're okay with it, he might not be complying by the regulations and no one knows anything because he's on a 10-acre piece of property. But someone with a small acupuncture practice might really upset their neighbor. So we need to get better with that. And that's something that one of the reasons I thought you'd be a great addition to the Board of Selectmen is to help create a template to navigate the rules and regulations of our town. And because you've done that.
Exactly. Leadership style can have a huge impact on how decisions are made and how communities come together or fall apart. If your opponent were elected, what are your biggest concerns for Easton's future? What do you think's at stake in terms of temperament, leadership, and the direction of the town?
I think we're in a very unique time. I think that I've learned from my professional career, I've learned from working with Dave Bendelglass and watching other leaders work, what kind of temperament you need. Easton needs a sober mind and steady hand. They need someone that's going to respect town employees, volunteers, not sue our town. I think, you know, you run a business, I run a business. There's something about that experience, what it's like to make payroll each week, what it's like to make decisions that affect not just you, not just your employees, but affects their families. I wear that burden pretty hard in my professional life, and I'm going to wear that burden even harder if I'm elected first selectman. It's not just our town employees, it's also our town residents. I think it's important that we continue on the path that we've been on. Dave has been such a great leader. He's had open, constant communication. He's been transparent. I think we've made a lot of progress at modernizing the way our town operates for our residents. And I'd like to continue that. And, I think there's a drastic difference in this year's election than elections past. I think that if Wendy Bowditch or Jeff Parker were running, we'd have disagreements, and things that I like wouldn't happen. Things that I don't like might happen, but I would say that our town would be run competently, at least.
In good hands, right? Okay, last question, last long question. If you're elected and we were to look back in 2 years, what would you hope people say changed for the better under your leadership?
Well, I think I'm a little different than Dave. I've got a lot of energy. He's done a lot in his 6 years. I would hope that people would look back and say that, we planned for a future when it comes to infrastructure, that we finished the EMS project, that we have invested in a food pantry for the times that we're living in. But I think the most important legacy I think any leader can give is to lead with respect and maturity. And I would hope that people said that he worked his ass off for our town, for our community, for everything that Easton is special for.
Great. Okay, so now we have 5 rapid fire questions.
Oh, these are the fun ones.
So I'm gonna give you a phrase, and you have to give a quick answer.
Okay.
Okay. Number one, coffee or tea?
Well, that's easy.
I know that
I come
answer.
here every morning. Coffee, iced coffee, black, 2 shots,
shots
of
of
espresso,
espresso.
and I usually have 2 every day. So I have the energy to do all this.
That's how it works. Number two, favorite Easton feature?
That's easy. Barn parties.
Barn.
There's something special about our community where people have music and food and beer, and we get together in their barns and have a fun night.
It's especially Easton. Number three, morning person or evening person?
Both. I've got a lot of
Of
energy,
course.
but I'm more of a morning person historically. I usually wake up around 5 to 5:30. I'm in the office by 6:30, and then the day gets rolling. And you know, with the meetings that I go to, probably 9 or 10, I usually get home.
You could run a coffee shop. Number four, your go-to pizza topping?
Well, I love a little prosciutto on my pizza, but it really depends on what kind of pizza you're talking about. You know, Connecticut's very specific about pizza, but if I'm at Modern in New Haven, I like the Italian bomb. If I'm in Sally's, I like just the red sauce with no cheese. And if I'm at Pepe's, I love a pepperoni.
All right, and tell us the song that always gets you pumped.
Well, I've got 2, but Tom Petty, Won't Back Down, because I'm never going to back down.
Of course.
And 2, Dance Yourself Clean by LCD Sound System. Great song. If you're elder millennial like me, you probably know them.
I don't know that one.